Paris, a prince of Troy, once visited Sparta as a guest of King Menelaus as part of a diplomatic visit. However, what began as peaceful diplomacy would soon ignite one of the most famous wars in history. During his stay, Paris formed a relationship with Menelaus' wife Helen, a woman renowned for her beauty. When Paris left Sparta, Helen went with him, either willingly or under persuasion, depending on the version of the story. This act would trigger outrage across Greece. Enraged, Menelaus called upon his brother Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, for support. What followed was one of the greatest wars in Greek mythology. To understand Agamemnon's role in the Trojan War, it's important to look at his family background and rise to power. Agamemnon was born into the troubled house of Atreus, a dynasty marked by betrayal, murder, and revenge. Agamemnon was the son of Atreus, the king of Mycenae, and the brother of Menelaus. The house of Atreus was infamous in Greek mythology for a cycle of violence that spanned generations. Agamemnon's father Atreus had claimed the throne of Mycenae after a bitter rivalry with his brother Thyestes. In one of the darkest episodes of Greek myth, Atreus killed Thyestes' children and served them to him in a gruesome feast, an act that fueled ongoing hatred within the family. Thyestes later fathered a son, Aegisthus, who would eventually become a key figure in Agamemnon's downfall. During the power struggle between Atreus and Thyestes, Agamemnon and Menelaus were forced to flee Mycenae for a time. They sought refuge with Tyndareus, the king of Sparta. While in Sparta, Agamemnon married Tyndareus' daughter Clytemnestra, while Menelaus Wednesday Helen, two unions that strengthened ties between Mycenae and Sparta. After Atreus was murdered by Thyestes and Aegisthus, Agamemnon returned to Mycenae and seized the throne. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra had several children, including Iphigenia, Electra, Orestes, and Chrysothemis. By the time Helen's abduction by Paris occurred, Agamemnon had established himself as one of the most powerful rulers in Greece. His position as king of Mycenae, one of the wealthiest and most influential city-states in Greece, made him the natural choice to lead the expedition against Troy. Assembling an army of warriors from across Greece, Agamemnon prepared to embark on a campaign that would define his legacy. With Greek forces gathered at Aulis, preparations for war were underway. However, the fleet found itself unable to sail. The winds had suddenly stopped, leaving the ships motionless. Frustration spread throughout the camp, and the Greek leaders demanded answers. Seeking guidance, Agamemnon consulted the seer Calchas, who claimed the cause was divine displeasure. According to Calchas, the goddess Artemis had been offended. Some accounts suggest that Agamemnon had once killed a sacred stag during a hunt, while others suggest he had insulted the goddess by boasting that he was a better hunter than the goddess herself. Whatever the reason, Artemis had halted the winds, and Calchas warned that they would not return unless Agamemnon offered a terrible price, the sacrifice of his own daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon was devastated. Sacrificing his daughter meant not only personal heartbreak, but also risking the fury of his wife, Clytemnestra. However, refusing the sacrifice could doom the entire expedition and his position as leader of the Greek forces. In some versions of the myth, Agamemnon tried to defy fate. He secretly wrote to Clytemnestra warning her not to send Iphigenia to Aulis. However, before the message could be delivered, Odysseus intercepted it, determined to ensure the Greeks could continue their campaign. Odysseus and Diomedes traveled to Mycenae and convinced Clytemnestra that Iphigenia was being summoned to Aulis for a prestigious marriage to Achilles, a deception designed to ensure her arrival. Iphigenia arrived believing she was to marry Achilles. Agamemnon greeted her with affection but carried the weight of the truth in silence. When Achilles discovered that his name had been used as part of the deception, he confronted Agamemnon and protested against the sacrifice. The sources differ on Iphigenia's reaction. In some version, she begged her father for mercy. In others, she displayed courage and accepted her fate willingly, believing her death was necessary to secure Greek victory at Troy. Iphigenia was brought to the altar. In one version of the myth, she was sacrificed, and the winds returned soon after. However, another tradition tells that Artemis intervened at the last moment, replacing Iphigenia with a deer and whisking her away to safety in the distant land of Taurus. With the winds restored, the Greek fleet set sail for Troy. The sacrifice had allowed the war to proceed, but the cost would linger over Agamemnon's house for years to come. Agamemnon, as the most powerful king among the Greek leaders, assumed the role of commander-in-chief of the entire expedition. The war, however, proved far longer than expected. What was intended to be a swift victory stretched into a 10-year siege. Agamemnon oversaw the Greek strategy, maintaining control over supply lines, siege operations, and diplomatic relations with the various Greek contingents. During a raid on nearby towns allied with Troy, the Greeks captured several women as war prizes. Agamemnon claimed Chryseis, the daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo, while Achilles took Briseis, a woman of noble status. Chryses soon arrived at the Greek camp, offering ransom in exchange for his daughter's release. As a priest of Apollo, he came in ceremonial robes, carrying gold and sacred gifts to appeal for her return. Agamemnon, however, refused. He dismissed Chryses harshly, insulting him and threatening violence if he returned. In response, Chryses prayed to Apollo for vengeance. The god answered by sending a plague upon the Greek army. As the sickness spread, soldiers died in large numbers, and morale crumbled. Concerned by the growing death toll, Achilles called an assembly and demanded answers. The seer Calchas revealed that the plague would only end if Agamemnon returned Chryseis to her father. Agamemnon reluctantly agreed to release Chryseis, but to maintain his status, he demanded compensation. He claimed Briseis, a woman Achilles had taken as a prize. This enraged Achilles, who felt dishonored and withdrew from the fighting, refusing to aid the Greeks further. With Achilles absent, the Greeks suffered severe losses. The Trojan forces led by Hector pushed the Greeks back toward their ships. Realizing the danger, Agamemnon sent envoys including Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix to persuade Achilles to return to battle. Agamemnon offered lavish gifts, including treasure and the return of Briseis, claiming he had acted out of pride rather than malice. Achilles, still furious, refused the offer and vowed not to fight until the Trojans reached the Greek ships. The turning point came when Achilles' close companion Patroclus entered the battle in Achilles' armor. Patroclus fought bravely but was ultimately killed by Hector. Enraged by Patroclus's death, Achilles returned to the battlefield, slaughtered countless Trojans, and killed Hector in single combat. Ultimately, the Greeks achieved victory through Odysseus' plan, the famous Trojan horse, which allowed Greek warriors to infiltrate the city and open its gates. With Troy finally conquered, Agamemnon emerged victorious. Among the spoils, Agamemnon claimed Cassandra, a Trojan princess and daughter of King Priam, as his concubine. This decision would further inflame tensions back in Mycenae. Agamemnon's journey home, however, would not be one of celebration. Unbeknownst to him, Clytemnestra had spent the years of his absence plotting revenge for the death of Iphigenia. After 10 years of war and the final victory at Troy, Agamemnon returned to Greece. While many Greek leaders faced struggles on their journeys home, Agamemnon's voyage was relatively smooth. During Agamemnon's absence, Clytemnestra had also formed a relationship with Aegisthus, a cousin of Agamemnon. Aegisthus had his own motives. Years earlier, Agamemnon's father Atreus had killed Aegisthus's brothers. Together, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus conspired to murder Agamemnon upon his return. When Agamemnon arrived, he brought with him Cassandra, the Trojan princess. Cassandra was also a prophetess, cursed by Apollo to foresee the future, but never to be believed. Clytemnestra greeted her husband with unexpected warmth, concealing her hatred beneath a facade of loyalty. Once inside, Agamemnon bathed to cleanse himself after his long journey. In this vulnerable state, Clytemnestra struck. According to some accounts, she entangled Agamemnon in a net or robe, trapping him before stabbing him repeatedly. In other versions, she attacked him directly with an axe. Meanwhile, Cassandra, gifted with prophetic sight, knew what awaited inside, yet bound by her curse, her warnings went unheard, and she too was killed by Clytemnestra shortly after Agamemnon's death. With Agamemnon and Cassandra dead, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus seized power in Mycenae. The murder of Agamemnon did not end the cycle of violence that plagued his family. His son Orestes would later return to avenge his father, killing both Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. This series of betrayals and vengeance formed part of the tragic legacy of the House of Atreus, a family cursed by bloodshed, betrayal, and divine punishment.